third question may overlap with the answer a little bit of what was talked about in the second question, but I want to ask it anyway because I think that if you guys expand a little bit on what you answered in the second question, that'll give people some more insight. So what are your other recommendations for fixing our education system? And I asked the panelists to think of just about anything with this, you know, no stipulations in place that, you know, oh, well, if we had this or we had that, you know, how they can do that. So Kurt, we'll start with this.
I had a few ideas. The first one was to commit to legit teacher training. And it's a really hard job that requires a ton of on-the-job experience. And we need to better prep our teachers who are new teachers for collaboration, for differentiated instruction, for different learners, and for the multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual environment we work in. And the reality is that more and more school districts are becoming like that. This sort of urban idea where it's only in cities where this occurs has gone by the wayside as immigration, as demographic changes have kicked in. And that said, I was the only one in my cohort, in my teacher training program, who wanted to teach in the city. I think that says a lot about how the teacher prep programs with a predominantly white workforce are pushing people in probably the wrong direction. And so we have to really align our training system with the realities of what we face in schools. And Teach for America is not a substitute. 2 years is not enough to get good at such an important job. And there's a theory that's sort of the 10,000 hour rule, where it takes 10,000 hours to become expert at something. And that basically means you have to work 5 years as a teacher to become an expert at teaching. And if that's the minimum amount of time it takes to get good, what happens if you change grades or change subject matter? So if you go from teaching history to go to now you teach psychology, some of the methods are the same, but some of the content's not. What happens if, you know, research suggests it takes 3 years for a subject area high school teacher to get good at it? If you're changing every year, that cycle takes longer and longer and longer to actually, to where you get to be proficient. In my own experience, I've taught for 6 years, and I have repeated one class in 6 years that I've taught more than one time. And I'm currently teaching at a new school and have 2 classes that are totally new to me. And I've learned a lot in 6 years, but most of the time I think I'm terrible more often than I think I'm good. And it shouldn't be a surprise. And we need to change the way in which we prep our teachers so that we can get past that. The second thing I would recommend is that empower teachers to have a role in change. An interesting video I was watching as I was thinking about this, the CEO of Vance & Leathers, which is a company that makes really top quality motorcycle safety gear, argues that innovation occurs on the factory floor, and that by losing manufacturing, the U.S. has lost out on all this innovation that we could have in manufacturing and production. And we have millions of teachers who are there in classrooms, experimenting, dealing with things all the time. And we need to tap that expertise. And Jen talked a little bit about this already. And that we are excellent at stealing effective stuff. That's what we do. Why don't we learn how to do, why don't we use our expertise to do other things? Let's turn to teachers for their ideas about how to reorganize schools so that it's more effective. One of the things is to create schools that are learning organizations. Those organizations that are continually learning and continuing to work to improve are the best kind of organizations. Not only to work for, they get the best results too. We can't fire our way to success, despite the fact that the myth is out there that if we just fire the bottom 5% of all the teachers, our schools will magically grow. It's a myth. We have to create schools that can provide useful, embedded, consistent, and engaging professional development, so we develop a teaching staff that's committed and that knows what's going on. And the last thing, equalize all the resources.
You know, I had this great egalitarian vision in terms of our public school system, you know, and I had maybe it was this idyllic past, and I was thinking of somewhat more idyllic past, but it's not good. It was really bad then too, even when I was going to school a million years ago. But the vision is that all the schools would get the same amount of resources. They get the same amount of, except to the extent that they require special needs. And there are certain needs that require more resources to address. For instance, students that have very special needs. Some of them because of their language. Some of them because of their language proficiency. Some of them because of other kind of issues that they have surrounding them involving poverty and this limited abilities. But other than that, in my mind, maybe a long time ago, there was this ideal school where you had different tracks maybe within the school, but those tracks were more geared towards trying to adjust for different types of kids that were in the school, like honors class that I used to attend when I was at Marshall High School, okay, or other types of classes that they might have within the school. My adult past had the idea that perhaps maybe you had for kids of different socioeconomic level at the same school, okay? But when you have a closed school, either by race, or you have a closed school either by political influence, or when you have a closed school either by ability to have educational background that allows you to position your kids into special schools, then you are going to have more of these type of kids all grouped in one school and everybody else. Okay, I see closed schools in this. Okay, I think that there are problems. Okay, they have closed schools. That's what I say, egalitarian, and this might be, in my view, probably heresy's sake. Okay, but it is an enemy in terms of the fact that egalitarian education. You have some schools that are closed and some that are open, because quite naturally the ones that are closed are going to be the favored ones. Okay, that's the way it's been. It's been an outcome and a product, I think, of as I said before, the DSEG decree that was entered into by the courts a long time ago in order to address the problem of race discrimination, and now it's created a different type of discrimination that we're impacting, although it's primarily still a race issue. It really is a race issue, okay? So, so I'd say if we could open up enrollment to everything, then maybe, and that would mean that you really truly have to think about neighborhood schools. You really have to think about it. And maybe there wouldn't be this great competition, within certain teachers, to go with this school or that other school, because they're all getting the same resources, okay? That might be idyllic on my part, but I think it's something that we need to at least explore and consider as a possibility, as a root of our problem, since the whole system itself is rooted in racism to begin with. That's the reason why I think we're in the position that we're in today.
I'm glad to hear you talk about a learning organization, because that's something that's dear to my heart too. Imagine if instead of talking about teaching, we were talking about learning. And instead of focusing on changing all the workers in the system so that each one of them was much better able to change what the student does, what if we did more things that changed the learning habits and aspirations of the students so that they did more to learn from what was available to them? Now, we're talking about lifelong learning, we're talking about relearning the business, these concepts of the business community. The internet has made knowledge and ideas and information from all over the world available to us at any time. And yet the motivation to learn from that information, instead of texting your friends and musicking and video games and all that kind of stuff, is still not there. A national advertising motivational building campaign that lasts for a long time might change that at some point, but you're trying to motivate learning. I wrote down here to answer this question that it takes a village is an overused phrase. I mean, it takes a village to raise a child. We've all heard it. But in this case, maybe that phrase ought to be coming back a little bit. This is another graphic I use. You'll see that I use a lot of pictures to illustrate my ideas. And if you go onto my website, you'll see all kinds of pictures like this. Some of these pictures were created by kids or reinterpreted by students. But this village is like a wheel. If you think of the hub of the wheel as the child and a timeline going through that from birth to work, then the spokes of the wheel go out to all kinds of different learning circles. Architects, technologists, writing, faith groups, finance, banking, environment. There's 16 identifiable career clusters that you could be in, whatever your aspirations are. And each of those represents people and jobs and opportunities that kids could aspire to if there were more people working to help them build those aspirations. So when I say it takes a village, I think of not just all of the people who might be tutors and mentors and things, but the people who might be the tech support or the donors or the policy makers or the voters. So my solutions that I keep coming back to are just based on my own experience with tutoring and mentoring, where we do get different people from different work backgrounds involved in the lives of kids, and some of those people go way beyond just that 1 or 2 hours a week in terms of how they become an advocate and how they adopt those kids as their own kids. So that needs to grow. And we need to find ways that we're engaging the university community, the business community, the hospital and healthcare community, the faith community, in each of those groups. If you look at maps, you can overlay on the maps Bank of America locations in the city. You can overlay Catholic churches in the city. You can overlay hospitals in the city. In each one of those, if you put a flag on the map indicating those who are engaged versus those who are not, now you're in a marketing strategy of how do we build engagement in more places so that over time we would have not full engagement, not just of the organizations in the poor school neighborhoods, but all the way out into the suburbs. We're a regional community where people need to be engaged in more places. We need to find a way that, when I'm hungry and I'm driving by McDonald's, my mind just says, oh, stop there and get some food. I've been conditioned to do that. What if people got up in the morning and they went through the day and they were conditioned to think of 4 things? One of them would be, how do I add new knowledge to this discussion? We're all sitting here tonight, we're throwing around different ideas. Who's going to take these ideas and share them with other people? Put them on a website, put them on a blog, do something. How do we collect knowledge, aggregate knowledge, and share knowledge with other people? And if during the course of the day I do that, I can look in the mirror at the end of the day and I can give myself an attaboy. I did something good today. How do we help more people find the information? If you look at a map showing Baptist churches in Chicago or Catholic churches in Chicago or Methodist or Presbyterian churches, it looks like measles. There's so many of them. Imagine if 4 times a year, started school in August, in November before the Christmas holidays, in February when it gets cold outside, people begin to drop out, and in May when we finish the school year and we got to start it again the next year. Imagine if just 50% of those churches, the pastor did a homily, and I've been in some of the black churches. They're the best speakers I've ever heard in my life. Imagine if the pastors were doing a homily tying scripture and service in the way they could be doing it, and saying to the congregation, we got a problem here. The Lord says we ought to be doing something. Here's where there's a whole bunch of information. Let's get together after church and talk about it. And here's a map showing the places where we could do something. Imagine if that were repeating year after year in terms of, and there was some accountability system so you could be recognizing those who were doing it and those who weren't doing it. And then imagine if that spilled over into the businesses and into the banks and into the universities, to where there were, in every one of those spokes of the wheel, there were people getting up and saying, we got to learn from this stuff, we got to do something. Number 2. Number 3 is that, like I said, when pastor says, here's something to read, in church, when you do the gospel and the people go into Sunday school and they talk about that. They don't read the whole Bible every Sunday, they read just a little bit of it, and they sit down and they talk about it and reflect on it, someone leads the conversation, and they go out and live their life for a week, and they come back next week and they do it again. So there's a facilitation. This problem is so big and so complex, and and the target is moving. We got constantly new people coming into the city, people changing classes, all kinds of stuff. So you're not going to learn it at one time. You got to engage with it and keep learning as lifelong learning. Over a period of years, our society can be much more knowledgeable about what the problem is and what the solutions are. And the 4th one is that you have a checklist of actions you can take. I can share this with somebody. I can reach out and find a place to volunteer. Not just as a tutor or a mentor, I can be on the board of directors, I can help you with communications, I can help organize events, I can help get people involved. There's all kinds of infrastructure underneath every organization that needs to be working with kids. And volunteers can fill a lot of those roles because there's not enough dollars. But I could give $1 too. I could put this in my estate planning, I could do all kinds of things to be trying to raise money. And if I go to the map and look for the neighborhood first, and then the programs in the neighborhood, I would be distributing my help into all of the places that need help, not to just the places with the brand names and the best marketing. In businesses, when I worked for Montgomery Ward, we had 400 stores all over the country. We had a team of people looking at where customers were and trying to put stores there. If there were teams of people in all these different sectors looking for where kids needed extra help and trying to put stores there or products and services there and keep them there for a long time, things might change. But it's the accountability of this. It's at the end of the day, those 4 things: getting information, getting people to look at the information, helping them understanding, and then acting in one or more ways, that when more people hold themselves accountable, at the end of the day, what did I do? Tomorrow, what do I do? That's a system of learning and responsibility that more of us outside of the school system, outside of the family system, need to be taking if we're going to change what's happening in our, not just our education system, but in our democracy.
Okay. I was speaking to a colleague over the summer about solutions to some of the problems in education, and she actually had worked for one of the most successful superintendents, the most successful districts in the country. And so I asked her, I'm like, well, what did he tell you about success and what it takes to, really make changes in education? And she said that his little soundbite quote was, "I find my best teachers and I get the heck out of their way." And what he meant by that was he went and he found those people that are putting the big numbers up and making changes and impacting students' lives. And he met with them once a month and asked them, what do you need? How can we do it? What's going to best help the school out? So the teachers were involved. He also took them, some of them, the master teachers, out of their classrooms a little bit. Instead of teaching their typical 5 classes a day, he would have them teaching 2 classes a day. And with the rest of their day, it was their job to team up with some of those new people that on-the-job training Kurt was talking about, where they track data on that teacher, they observe them, they set goals with that teacher, they track them throughout the year, and they create a better teacher. So that on-the-job training isn't just you in the 4 walls with the 30 kids and sink or swim. So it's more of a team environment where all the teachers are literally becoming experts. There's a lot less of that, like switching grades, changing this, holding teachers back from becoming experts, because now you have the collaboration that you need. And of course, a big obstacle to that is going to be money, because if I was taken out of the classroom for 4 periods a day, that means someone needs to teach those 4 periods worth of kids. So funding becomes an issue, equitable funding. So freeing up of teachers' time and schedules that are considered master teachers, that are considered experts, that's a big thing. That will really create an entire generation of not just good, not just okay, not just mediocre teachers, but an entire school where every single teacher becomes that expert faster and with a lot more support. So that's something that can definitely be done. But the bottom line is everyone needs to invest in education. That means on the local level, we need to invest time. That means time needs to be given to teachers and parents to collaborate with one another. On the governmental level, educators need to be involved. They need to be invested. I think that the decisions that affect every child in every classroom are not being made by educators. They're being made by consultants and government officials who have never set foot in a classroom. And they tend to kind of get away with it by saying, well, we collaborated with education people in this field and this field. And then when you investigate, you find out those educational consultants were lifetime university educators
who had gotten their master's in education and their PhD in education, and then taught college courses on education, but had never taught a single child. So that's another problem. When laws are being made that affect each and every one of our kids, where educators don't have a voice in what those laws are going to be. So educators need to be invested in the governmental level. On the funding level, businesses need to be investing in our schools, like we were mentioning. If we only rely on the government to fund schools and just hope for the best, then the money is just going to be shuffled around. It's going to be not equal. We're going to have a lot of problems. And like right now, we're in an economic crisis. Every school is losing funding. Schools that need more funding are losing what they had in the first place. So now they're in more dire straits. So businesses need to realize that this is going to be their workforce in 5, 10, 20 years. If you want a successful workforce that you don't have to spend thousands or millions training when they come to you, unable to problem solve, unable to critically think, you need to invest in those kids now, because they're the ones who are going to be working for you. So if you're worrying about having your company be a long-term success, you also need to be thinking about the workforce that will one day be working for you and creating your product and bringing it to the marketplace. As far as on the public level, the public just needs to invest in our teachers and schools. Whether that means that you help on the playground, or whether that means you just call up your child's teacher and ask, hey, how are they doing? I think that that would make things a million times better. But the bottom line is investment. Every single person needs to be invested, because believe it or not, all of us are the neighborhood. Like you were mentioning the neighborhood schools, every single person involved in schools, whether you're only a taxpayer who has no children in any schools in the city of Chicago, your money is still paying for those schools. So you may as well get the most out of it. You're part of the neighborhood. The educators are part of the neighborhood, the students are part of the neighborhood, the parents are part of the neighborhood. The entire neighborhood has to be involved and invested. That's the only way we can fix it.